This is Ash Wednesday. It's one of those celebrations in our church that is very hard to explain to people who are not part of it, even harder to explain to those of us who are in it. Lent itself is one of the earliest celebrations we have in our Christian community. It goes back to the second, maybe even the first centuries, where those who were joining the faith took this period of time to study and reflect. And why 40? Well, 40 days corresponds with the 40 days Jesus was in the wilderness. And why do we start on Wednesday? That's just math. If we really believe in Sunday as a mini Easter, then it is exempt from the Lenten celebrations. So then you have to get 40 days, and we count back 6.5 weeks essentially. And here we are on Wednesday, recognizing the beginning of Lent. Why the ashes on the head? Well, that actually is a tradition that comes out of the 8th century, where they were paying more attention to penance than I think needs to happen, but it was certainly very much in keeping with the culture at that time and the struggles that they were having. And this worm theology, when I'm talking worm, I'm not talking worms with Martin Luther. I'm talking but that has a capital W. I'm talking lowercase w. That is suggests that we are lower than worms, that we're not good enough. That's not anything that Jesus taught us. That's certainly not biblical. But there was a common thing, and that's a trail that follows through the tradition of our church. Um, Celebrating a service, an Ash Wednesday recognition, actually doesn't even date until the 1100s. So it's a half of our church history before we even started to recognize this day as somehow marking a period or a season of significance. And so, what is Lent? What is the whole point? Well, I think this year we have a few more things that we pay attention to than we might normally. In the past several months, with the political changes in certain countries, with the economic threats that are going along, with the renewed sense of nationalism, particularly in Canada, with the strengthening of ties that were always there and the loss of ties that we always took for granted. All of this kind of is a background that permeates what's going on with our Lenten celebrations, our Lenten recognition. Lent is always meant to be a journey. It's not to be a time of punishment. It's not to be something taken lightly. You'll hear people talking about, I gave up coffee or I gave up chocolate. That's not the point. That is so superficial, it doesn't even begin to touch this journey that we're supposed to be on. It's not about eating only fish on Friday. It's not about denying meat on Wednesday. It's not those are perfunctory behaviors that make people feel like they're doing something, but they're not getting at the depth of the season. And we're talking about a season of reflection, of personal journeying, to find out, to see, is our faith deep enough? Is what we are doing in line with what we believe Christ has asked of us? And not going into great depths. Those of you who are struggling with depression, be careful of how you do a dive, because none of this is meant to make you feel bad or worse about yourself at all. It is an intellectual reflection. What am I doing? Can I do better? And as the saying goes, if you give 80% of the 40% you've got going on that day, you're still given a lot. Meant to be someone else's 100%, but it's still a lot of what you have. So there's no comparison there. There's no where should I be in my journey. It's all discovery, and it's all walking with Jesus, and it's all finding that place in us where we just grow our faith just a little bit more than we have it today. So, turning the scriptures, we have in Matthew part of the Sermon on the Mount that covers four things, four very simple things. Now, simple doesn't necessarily mean easy, but it means understandable, pretty straightforward. Four things to look to as a way of marking our questions for how this journey continues. The first is about almsgiving. It's alms is identified with money, but there's many ways to give. Your time, your intention, your thoughts, even if you're not able to do something else. Money, of course, is big and it helps, but not everybody is in the position where they can give money freely, but they might be able to give something else. That's the first thing Jesus talks about. It's essentially a culture of giving. Are we reaching down and giving what we can? Now, this is not giving to the point of pain. This is giving what we can, what our excess is, what we have left over. Are we doing that well enough? The second point Jesus makes is about prayer. Prayer should be continuous. Prayer should be constant. And I remember when I was a little kid, I couldn't figure out how you could pray constantly if prayer involved kneeling or looking down or sitting or stopping, and then these elaborate words would pour out of you. As an adult, I came to realize that's not prayer. I mean, it's prayer, but it's not the constant prayer. Sometimes prayer can just be, Jesus, walk with me now. That's prayer. You can do that on the way to run an errand or to your next meeting or to deliver a document. Praying is something that we do to have a conversation with God, to have that relationship going. And Jesus says, don't be like the hypocrites. Don't pray out loud trying to get all of this attention. We all know what that looks like, especially those of us who live in North America or the Western world in general. All we have to do is turn on television, and there's a whole lot of people doing a whole lot of hypocritical praying out there. We know what not to do. So now Lent is an opportunity for us to find out what we do, what we can do, what makes sense for us. Sometimes the prayer is just thank you. I've got a client of mine that is just every now and again she'll just burst out, "Thank you, Jesus." That's prayer. I don't know what's going on in her head beforehand. She's perfectly sane. There's nothing wrong with her intellectually, but she's just such a spiritual, joyful person that this just kind of bursts out of her when she starts thinking about the world that she lives in, all the gifts that she has. That's prayer. So don't be looking for attention while you're praying. That's a private conversation between you and God. The third thing Jesus talks about is fasting. Now, there's a lot of expectations and assumptions around fasting. One of them, as I mentioned earlier, is this whole, give up candy or give up coffee or something. That is not genuine fasting. It's deprivation, maybe. It's, not feeling good if you can actually stick to it. And I got to tell you that I decided I was going to give up sugar. I lasted exactly 3 hours. That is not the kind of fasting that actually makes a difference. If you are always focused on what you're giving up, as opposed to focus on how you're getting things out of your way, then you've missed the point. When Jesus talks about fasting, when the early church talked about fasting, it was not about personal suffering. Believe it or not, I know that's the assumption that goes on, but in the earliest stages, it was not to make us suffer so much as it was to make us fresher. It was to make us more open. It was to make us appreciate community if we were depending on community to feed us, or just silence of being in God's presence. The whole idea of fasting, and again, if you have a food issue, do not do this if it's going to compromise your health, because that's not the expectation either. But it's a way of getting stuff out of your focus, so that you're feeling something, you're allowing your body to grow naturally, your faith to grow in new directions without obsessing about the stuff that you know you shouldn't be eating or know you shouldn't be part of. And fasting is not just food, it's also behavior. So are there things that you know that you shouldn't be doing? You want to push those aside, replace them with things you should be doing. That's what prayer actually helps to do. Almsgiving, giving it in general, helps to do. And the fourth thing Jesus talks about is stuff, getting rid of stuff. I'm sure you've met people, as I have, who are surrounded by stuff. It becomes overwhelming. Jesus reminds us, don't focus on acquisition. Don't focus on besting the other person with how much you have, because it gets in the way of your spiritual life. There's a call for us to live as simply as we possibly can. Now, again, not to the point of real suffering. As I often tell people, when Jesus talks about not having stuff, he didn't live in Canada where you need a coat for every season. So you've got to be reasonable in how you get rid of stuff or how you clear stuff out. But if you walk through this Lent and you put emphasis on giving and praying and fasting and cleansing away the stuff in your life, you will have a path. You will have a journey to a deeper sense of spiritual well-being. It is incredibly countercultural. Everywhere you turn, you're going to have people that are trying to force you back into what they recognize as being comfortable. But that's not what we're about for Lent. For these few short weeks, we are about deepening our faith. We have no idea where this journey is going to take us, but it is a journey that we are asked to be part of, so that when we get to Easter Sunday, it is going to be a moment of true resurrection of what is going on for us and for our faith development and for our understanding of our place in the world. Simple, not easy, simple. That's the path of Lent. And on this Ash Wednesday, we begin.